Good evening and welcome to the school committee meeting for Friday, February 27th. We're here to interview Superintendent Finalist candidate Tiffany Ostrander this evening. Good evening.
Hi.
Thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So our first question, I'll take that one. What did you learn about the Shrewsbury Public Schools today during your day in our district?
Thanks for asking. I had an awesome day. This evening people have been saying, "Oh, you must be so tired," and I don't feel that way at all. Actually, I feel invigorated. I was just impressed with our students and with our staff. I was able to start my day when I started my visits at Floral Street School, where I got to engage with some students who had just come in from sledding. I think the joy was palpable. And it was just impressive to walk the building with Principal Lisa McCubry and see how, it's not the youngest building in town anymore, but it's aging with beauty over time. I was impressed with, I think it's 28 years old now, and the care of the facility is beautiful. The rugs have just been updated, and the teachers I saw some EL lessons in a third grade classroom, and very engaged students, and great teaching and learning. Then I went over to the high school next. I was able to visit high school classrooms as well. I saw math modeling, which was very impressive. And again, like tons of student ownership and engaging classroom work. And that was honestly my favorite part of the day, was engaging with high school panel. It brought me great joy to engage with our students to see what the high school students are concerned about. I had several questions about how would I support students to feel safe and engaged at school, especially if there were contexts happening out of school, such as ICE, that were impacting their feeling of safety. So we had a long conversation about that. We talked a lot about the upcoming cell phone ban and my position. And that was the one question of the day I did not anticipate, I have to be honest with you. But it was amazing to see how articulate they were, how confident they were, and how invested they are in the school system and ensuring that it stays healthy and productive and engaging for all students. And then I ended my day, almost ended my day at Oak and Sherwood. What's amazing there is to see the alignment happening in EL literacy, K through 8, to see the coherence and the alignment that Mrs. Clowder has been spearheading, and really seeing that come to fruition at that level, and how engaged students were, and the writing that was happening was very impressive. And then I came here to Beale and caught dismissal, which is a very independent process for students, and I was amazed at the amount of student leadership. I think everywhere I went today, I was just very impressed with the amount of student independence, the way that our faculty engage with students, know them deeply, the joy that you can feel in all the buildings. And, it just gave me an opportunity to talk to my colleagues in a different way, to ask about what they feel the pressures are in their work, and think about how I would support them moving forward. I think it's great that we now have this literacy curriculum that is K-8, because I think there's an opportunity to have more collaboration between buildings, and thinking about how we support our teachers to utilize this new curriculum, especially with the Oak Middle School coming on a year after. They're kind of in the thick of it, where the elementary schools were previously, but I think there's some opportunity to do some cross-building collaboration. But overall, this is a really impressive place, and part of the reason I want to be here is our faculty and staff are just so invested in teaching and learning, and you can feel that deep engagement and commitment when you go to our schools.
Thank you.
The next question, can you give us an example of how you have ensured that all students, regardless of race, ethnicity, gender, socioeconomic status, and academic ability, have equitable access to educational services?
Definitely. So I'm always looking at our systems and structures, and thinking about how we can ensure that all students do have access. I think Ms. Belcito and her team has certainly helped to develop the co-teaching model for special education, supporting students to be in classrooms as much as possible while still retaining and maintaining the services that they need to support their learning. I was able to work with Christina Manos and kind of expand that model, thinking about how does that look for multilingual learners. I think what's kind of different from IEPs versus the ELL process is there's more of a timestamp of the amount of time that students are mandated to have services based on their level, whether you're a newcomer or where you're toward full proficiency in English. Whereas in an IEP, we can mandate and choose what's the right match for each student. But when you're a newcomer, it's 80 minutes a day that you're potentially out of the classroom setting. So Christina Manos and I and our ESL team at Coolidge have worked together to think about co-teaching opportunities very similar to what you would see with special education, so that students are in their classrooms, but they're also still receiving the language support they need to access the instruction. We've also been trying to work on some translanguaging in those settings within the co-taught spaces to get some primary words and vocabulary so students can respond in an alternate language, their native language, to get some of those key ideas because we just don't want English to be the barrier. In addition, we've really worked on making sure that families who are multilingual, who may not have proficiency in communicating in English, are able to access all of our communications. And I mean that in every way possible, whether that's the written word, communications for meetings, whether parent conferences, PTO, really working to use translators whenever possible. One large shift we made at the elementary level, and Coolidge's reason for doing so is we've shifted our curriculum night to be open house nights. That really made a difference because what we were noticing was there was a section of our families who were not coming because they couldn't access the way we were communicating with them because it was all presentations and slides, the teacher at the front of the room. Additionally, it was difficult for families because we told them they couldn't bring their children. So there was a barrier to access for them to engage in those nights because they're, the payment for babysitting or difficulty with not having family nearby. So by moving to an open house, what we're able to do is we're able to put kids, as leaders in their school communities to share, this is where we learn and this is my teacher, but still providing opportunities in the scavenger hunt where parents are engaging in the curriculum, but their child may be the person who is doing the translating for them. I think the other thing we've really been working on is the inclusivity of all cultures. We all are unique and special and bring something to the community, and we try our best to really be open about all the ways we celebrate, all the holidays, the traditions that we do with our families. That's really important to us. So thinking about Ramadan that has just started, we read about Ramadan, we talk about Ramadan, our families come in and share their practice during Ramadan, and I think it's been really impactful and inclusive. Just this week we have a group of students who are fasting, and so they're not in the cafeteria, and their friends are high-fiving them. They're like, "You got this! This is the first time I'm fasting." I'm so proud of that culture, and I think some of it is just not shying away from talking about things, but rather being really inclusive of everything and everyone. And building a community where it's okay to ask questions, especially in a way that's out of curiosity and respect and care. So those are just some of the things we have in place.
Great. Thank you.
Closing achievement gaps requires deliberate data-driven decisions and also equitable outcomes, right? What targeted strategies have you implemented to address the achievement gaps? And then can you give us some examples of what the impact they have and how you measure those?
Yeah, so I'm very data driven in all the ways. I think, quantitative data tells a story. But it never tells the full picture of the story. I think looking at outcomes, of course, in a numerical way is important, and that's surely how we are measured by the state, and you have to pay attention to that. However, there are other numerical things like growth that help us to judge whether or not our instruction is impacting student learning. And then I believe in all the street data, the qualitative data, asking students if they feel seen and valued, asking students if they're interested in what they're learning or how they're learning, asking them if they feel like they could learn a different way. I think students are able to tell us mostly what they need and what's working in our classrooms. I also think it's important to be invested in talking with our families about their perception of what they want in their education for their child and how they feel it's going. And I think it's important to gain the information from home where families are, they're the first line in coaching their student, whether it's difficulty with homework or school refusal. There are certainly things that we can't see as a school, and if you're not asking, then you may never know. So I think it's really important to engage families often and ask those questions and build relationships so that you can gain more information. I also think that our teachers can provide us with information we need to close some of the knowing doing gap. So for example, with EL, we visit classrooms and do instructional rounds so that we can see what practice is looking like, how the curriculum is being implemented, ways in which we can enhance the curriculum, or change maybe some of the teaching practices so that all students are more deeply engaged. But it's also helpful to talk to the teachers about how does it feel to teach this curriculum? What other supports or coaching do you need? And by using the information we learned through rounds and through conversation at Coolidge, we've established small group coaching based on the trends that our teachers need, and we vary what small group coaching looks like. We've had several cycles of small group coaching. The first time we did it, we did vertical teams, K through 4, because we wanted them to understand where students were coming from and where they're going to with the curriculum so that they could understand the coherence. Also, it provided an opportunity for teachers to become more familiar with, if a student didn't have a prerequisite skill, they understood how they were taught it previously. And we've got some feedback about how that was really hard because they weren't ready for it yet. So I think, it provided me an opportunity to also change my gap in knowing and understanding to shift what that practice looks like. So we've done small group coaching differently and are getting rave reviews from teachers about how it's helping them to feel supported and more effective in their classrooms.
Thank you.
All right, so I have the next question. Could you tell us about a time when data contradicted your initial assumptions about teaching and learning, and what actions did you take?
Sure. You were in other interviews that I've been in today, so I'm going to tell a repeat story, but I will build on it. I've always been data driven. That's always been important to me. So when I was a classroom teacher, I used to have students rate their engagement, and we would talk about how are you feeling your engagement today? And I would do it with the rainbow for the Wi-Fi. Are you highly engaged? Are you somewhat engaged? And the bars would go down and they would be disengaged. And what that experience showed me is that I always kind of assumed the students who were disengaged would be the students who maybe didn't understand the content or struggled. Maybe they felt like they would give up. And that wasn't the case. Most of the time it was the students who were high achieving. They felt like the task was too easy. And I needed to hear that. I needed to hear that as an educator. And that really changed my practice. I found that having that qualitative data, asking kids, does this work for you? Does it not? Same with staff, really impacted how I now move forward. Just because kids look engaged doesn't actually mean they're connected. They may be disconnected. So it's important. And the same thing with staff with their professional learning. We don't want them to do it for compliance. We want them to actually be engaged and interested in the work. So I think, I have use that practice in other ways at the end of professional development. We ask our teachers, how did this feel? How did this go? What would you do differently? What do you need more of? And again, just because people look engaged doesn't always mean you get the best score on the professional learning that you've provided. So I think that's just one way that data has influenced my practice, that I've come to learn that looking engaged doesn't always fully mean that. And that's just one example.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next question. So in terms of technology in the classroom, we know iPads certainly are a powerful tool for instruction and especially learning, but we also know there's a value in traditional non-technology-based instruction and learning as well. Can you provide some examples of how you balance those two approaches to ensure an innovation that strengthens instruction but doesn't replace the strong teaching practices?
Yes, this is a great question. Thank you. So there's the SAMR model, which is essentially a model that talks about when technology is used in the classroom, kind of the levels. The lowest level is the S, thinking about substitution. These are things that you can do with paper and pencil, but people are just now doing on screens. Whereas the highest level is like redefining what you're able to do with technology in your classroom. And I think it's important to keep the varying levels in mind, because if there's something we can do on paper and pencil, it is actually more beneficial, says the research, to do it on paper and pencil. I think there's a lot of value in holding books. And the research says that too. I think sometimes when students are reading online, we notice that they can click in and out of books very quickly. They can become very bored with the content that they're reading, and they're just so used to having content so quickly that it's easy for them to just navigate, flip out of this book, flip into that one. But we want them to be deeply reading, deeply engaging with texts. That's really important. We also want to be able to find ways that we're using technology that promote opportunities that might not be available. So I think about using technology when we're learning about trees, for example, or learning about birds, or whatever the content is in EL and the module that we're in. Being able to zoom in a professional from that particular, a botanist or whatever it is. Those are the things where we can use technology to give kids experiences that they wouldn't have had previously. And I think the same thing can be true in teaching them how to communicate through the use of technology, so that they're making presentations, they are creating different projects, they're graphically designing, they're preparing themselves for a career. But I don't think that we need to have the iPads up all the time to do it. And I do think that sometimes what could be a really engaging or rigorous task might be not as engaging when you do it solo on an iPad. I'd rather see kids collaborating, talking through things together, problem solving, modeling on whiteboards. And I think those are all things we still do in our adult lives. And those are skills kids still need to have. And they are really important. I do think the iPad has brought a different level of accessibility that I also have to mention and appreciate, because I think about like the visibility supports that it has, the accessibility for read aloud, the translating, the opportunity for students to communicate as a device. And those are the times where it's like, yes, we should have it out. We should have it available, and we should be using it and supporting students to use it all the time. But I do think we could be judicious and when we do that, and I think a lot of our faculty are really thinking a lot about that lately too.
Thank you.
All right, we're back to normal.
Yes.
So school districts are often faced with implementing state mandates with limited resources. What creative approaches have you utilized that resulted in increased student achievement and academic success?
Yeah, state mandates. I think as a leadership team, we work together to work through many of the mandates that come our way, to collaborate and problem solve through them. The number one story that pops in my mind right now is COVID. we needed kids to come back to school. It was important that we provided learning for our students, and in that year still took the MCAS. But we designed a way for students to be in our buildings, to engage in learning, to have consistent access, to food in our cafeterias, to remain safe, for our educators to remain safe, and still, move the needle in getting them to learn those grade level standards for the year. I think, some of the other ways that we have continued to implement mandates during challenging times to keep student outcomes moving. I talked a little bit already about the ELL support. When you mandate service for a level of need for multilingual learners, what sometimes the challenge has been is those students aren't in their classrooms. So they were missing social studies, science, and really needing to work around when we could schedule students for those services. And by implementing the co-teach model, it's provided an opportunity for students to be in their core instruction there for the entire literacy block, which helps their outcomes, because how are you able to meet the assessment goals if you weren't in the room when they were teaching it? I think that's just challenging. It creates further gaps for students. I think I'm trying to think of other mandates in particular. I'm not thinking of any others in particular, but I think, some of the testing is difficult because that is a mandated process, but making sure that we train our staff as best we can and optimize the ways that we can provide students access to accommodations, familiar test administrators, and preparing them along the way so that they can give their best effort.
In terms of the budget process,
Yes.
Can you describe what your process would look like for developing a district budget aligned with the district's strategic plan?
Yes. I've always found it interesting that when the start of the school year is happening, we're all very excited and looking forward to the year ahead. And Dr. Sawyer and Mr. Girardi are already thinking about creating fiscal budgets for the following school year. And I appreciate their diligence. And as a result, we always are land in a place where we have a great budget. But in the fall, it really starts that internal planning, thinking about priorities with you, the school committee, the central office leadership team, and the principals, thinking about rolling over level service to maintain the services we have in the current year into the next year, thinking about program evaluation and the mandated services that we need to have in place as really step kind of number one. And once we have those budget priorities and we have aligned with the strategic plan, we can start with a budget proposal. So how we're going to spend the dollars by each department, why those dollars are important, why they need to go there, the impact if the dollars didn't go there is something to consider as well. And then engage the school committee some more. Always talking to the school committee with workshops and public forums, being able to gain feedback from the community so they have some say on how those dollars are being spent is important. And then, getting to a place where we can, the superintendent can recommend a budget, and hopefully you can vote to approve that budget. That'll eventually go to town for review and hopefully a vote.
Thank you.
On the same lines, effective financial leadership requires the ability to translate complex physical information into a clear, actionable insights for diverse stakeholders, ensuring transparency, trust, and informed decision making.
Mm-hmm.
How do you approach communicating complex financial information to school committee and the broader community? Please provide a specific example that demonstrates your ability to specify key concepts, align stakeholders, and supports decision-making process.
Great, sure.
Thank
So I think, visuals are the key. I think it's really helpful when you can show tables, graphs. One that sparks me always is I find the DMG table to be amazing, where we talk about, we're in the highest achieving 15% and the lowest spending 15%. I find that slide to be like, wow, look at all we're doing with really responsible budgeting and efficiency. So I think that's one way I would communicate through visuals as much as possible. I can give an example. I am on an MSBA school building committee in another town. And we are building what will be the largest elementary school in the state of Massachusetts. There'll be 1,200 students who go to school there. And part of what needed to happen in order for this project to move forward and for the town to understand why this really expensive project, $158 million, was something they should vote for and prioritize. And the way we were able to help with that was to visually show, by moving a grade level into this new school building, it would relieve the overcrowding in another school. And it did have a trickle effect. So essentially, in this particular school district, it was K1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So the new building will be 2, 3, 4. So what that did is, by putting second, third, and fourth graders together, it relieved 80% of the overcrowding pressures in all the other schools. So we were able to show, by moving this one grade level here and building this much bigger building, we were able to solve the problems in these 4 other places, which precludes us from needing to do all these other building projects, essentially, because we were able to be creative. And it was a big ask, and it did pass. But it was really important that we communicated regularly. We had focus groups. We had tables and graphs and flyers. And it was a roadshow. I mean, I did that. I would go to meetings in the morning before I would come to work here in Shrewsbury. I would go to meetings after school at night at a condo association meeting. I went and met with the CPAC, or it's not called the CPAC there, but you know what I mean? Because it was just really important that all the interest groups understood how this would be a benefit for all students. Even if your child didn't get to go to the brandy new school, it was a benefit for everybody. So I think using visuals is important when communicating about finances.
Thank you.
What is your vision for overcoming the need for an expansion of Shrewsbury High School simultaneous with the Proposition 2.5 override?
Yeah. That's when Joe had announced his retirement, I immediately said, wow, the next superintendent has a big job. And it's important because I think these are 2 opportunities where we have to really advocate to protect the structure of our school system, the quality of the programming we provide. So in terms of the high school expansion, I'll start there, and the renovation. I think doing this with MSBA support is the most financially responsible decision for the town. I think people could say, oh, but that building was only built in 2002. And that is true. However, it was built in 2002 for about 1,400 students, and we're at 1,800, almost 1,900 students, and the overcrowding is impacting the programming that we can provide to students due to space limitations, the lunch schedule. It makes us have more of a fixed schedule, and really we want to be able to provide comparable programming, especially to the other school systems around us, and we want our educational programming to be what determines our spaces, not the spaces determining what we give for educational programming. So I think it's just really important, and I think Mr. Bazidlo and his team have done an amazing job using all the space they can. I know that Shauna is in what was a display case that is now her office. So I think they've used every nook and cranny. But I think it will be really important to continue to message that we need this space. It is overcrowded. It does impact programming, and we want to provide the best education to our students. And in order to do that, we do need to have an expansion so that they have the learning space for teaching and for our students. And by doing it with MSBA funding, we also have an opportunity to provide the renovations because the building is aging. So if we have this support, we should take advantage of it. So I think that's, just very important, and I would want to be somebody who advocates for that. In terms of the override, I was talking to Mr. Zakar today and talking about, there's always, tension when we say the word override, I think for everybody, because I think we see dollar signs. But I think, that the groundbreaking agreement and the override in 2021 is really what has brought our community this feeling of stability when all around us that has really not been the case. School districts who are $4 million short, $8 million short, needing to cut staff and programming. And I think it is our responsibility to be as proactive as we can be in, avoiding a cliff in funds that could really impact the services we provide as a school system. And I think it is easier to prevent that than recuperate from it. I was here when in 2014 when we had an override, and I do remember the year, I believe it was before 2013, where we had 32 students in second grade classrooms. And that was so impactful to students, to teachers. The quality that those second grade teachers could provide was different. It's difficult to know children so deeply and differentiate when class sizes are impacted. And so, and the teacher burnout, the impact that has on faculty is challenging too. So I think it would be, priority number one, to work with Mr. Mizikar, the select board, and all of you in thinking about what does our next agreement say and what is our promise to the community to continue to, provide this high quality educational experience. And I think at the same time, it's going to be important to understand that when you vote for a school to happen, that bill comes later. And that the first hit to the tax dollars is actually would be from an override agreement rather than the high school expansion. You don't actually start paying that bill until the building is started. So we would have some space between the two, even though you vote for them potentially at the same time. But the community needs to know that.
Thank you.
Okay, how would you balance financial realities with maintaining educational quality during a budget reduction? And what would be the first thing you would reduce?
I have just said it, I've been here during difficult financial times. I think, looking at the strategic priorities and trying the best we can to protect the core, to what we can commit, protecting class size, but also understanding that is probably a place where you can reach more efficiency first. Because if there are places where we can reduce a section, but stay within guidelines, that would be my first place to go. I think, there are so many things that are dynamic and moving. I think about transportation costs, for example. There are things that, you have to pay. And we've been very fortunate to have good contracts with a transportation. They really work well with us. But also looking at, are there any programs or initiatives that are not, part of the core that we could potentially reduce, or places where our rate of return in supporting student outcomes is not as high as others would be the places I would look for.
Thank you.
So, as superintendent, how would you ensure that staff, families, and community members with differing viewpoints feel genuinely heard and respected? And can you describe some specific strategies and how you build that trust, navigate through challenging or conflicting perspectives?
Sure. Yeah, so I think relationships are foundational, and I know that disagreements can be productive, and having differing opinions can actually lead to better outcomes. So I think it takes time to listen, to feel like you're creating a space where people can be heard. So I think that would need to look like varying processes. I was talking to Dr. Sawyer today about just like media in general. I think there's an opportunity for us to have some social media presence, a little bit heavier there to share out some of the positive things we're doing. However, sometimes some of the things we do, parents may not think is a best fit for their child. They may have a different viewpoint. So I think all along the way, being sure that there's opportunities to, especially at the beginning, focus groups, lunch and learns, having office hours in different buildings during the school day, so staff don't feel like they have to come after school to meet with you. I think opportunities where you send out surveys for feedback on a regular basis, not just the summative end of the year. I try and do that a few times a year for families and staff because it's important to know how people are feeling and if they're connected in the moment. I also am a big fan of picking up the phone. Oftentimes, you can get a heated email, and it's important that that family feels heard and that you can read that and sit with, wow, this person has a feeling about whatever's going on. But to say, I'd love to have a productive conversation with you, and may I call you? Or would you like to come in and meet with me? I really appreciate the dialogue, so that way it's not zipping an email and then waiting a couple days. I love to talk things through, to hear some perspective, to lean in and ask questions, to say, help me understand. And I think if you continuously treat people the way they deserve to be treated, with respect, with understanding, but also staying true to your core and to your boundaries, I do this work so that all students can succeed, and holding that boundary too, so that people know where you stand is really important. Yeah, and I think it's challenging times, and I don't necessarily know there's a right side of the table. You can see a problem from three sides at this point, and so I think it's just remaining neutral, calm, respectful, and asking a lot of questions to lean in to find common ground.
What would be your number one priority during your first 6 months in the role?
Of 6 months, yeah. It's kind of tricky because if it starts on July 1st, but then everything's happening in the fall, it's kind of a dual priority, I would say. I wrote myself a little entry plan here that I'm just going to reference as we chat. I think, I've said it before, but I think building relationships, seeking to understand. I know I have worked in this school district for 13 years, but I certainly don't know every school community intimately. Each school has its own characteristics and traditions, and it's really important that although we are one school community, we continue to have the individuality in each building. So I think it's, preparation with Dr. Sawyer before he goes, transitioning with him and the board, learning key information, meeting with teachers, staff, union, para-educators, understanding community perspectives, meeting with Mr. Mizikar, meeting with select board, really understanding the systems and the structures and getting a feel for the culture in the buildings and what everyone's priorities are. That really would be a primary purpose. And then, of course, starting to advocate and be the face of what the school district needs, which is a vote to approve the expansion of the high school and potential override agreement.
Okay, if selected, how would you navigate the transition from a peer to becoming the superintendent, particularly in managing staff with whom you were previously working as a colleague?
For sure. So in my doctoral studies, I have been researching superintendents and assistant superintendents in particular, and the way that they use data to inform professional learning and organizational learning. And one thing I have certainly learned is that the superintendent really is the primary coach and support for principals who have been my direct colleagues, as well as assistant superintendents. And I really am motivated to be in this role because I would love to support my colleagues in that way. I am naturally a problem solver. I try to think outside the box, and there are often times when we'll be having collegial conversations and someone will share with me, having this problem, or what might you do with this family, or this email came in and this is how it felt when I read it, and I think this is what I want to respond. What do you think? I just would really appreciate being a coach, a person who helps people to solve problems in their building, to expand their practice, to provide them with further learning opportunities that would fuel the work we do here in our schools. And I look forward to working with them in a different capacity. I think we have expert leaders here, both in our assistant superintendents and principals. But I think we all admittedly still have things to learn, and I think our group is interested in learning more too. But I don't plan to micromanage them. They don't need to be micromanaged. They're great. But it would be great to help them solve and find some solutions to problems that they're having, and be the person to also cheerlead for them and say, no, you did this right, you did this well, and here are the outcomes for kids or staff, or the resolution to a tricky situation as a result.
Thank you.
Perfect. That's a good one. Next one more aligns to that. Imagine you need to evaluate or redirect the work of someone who was your peer. How would you approach this conversation?
For sure. I've done this before. I became an administrator, and my colleagues, I was now their evaluator. This has happened. And I think, holding true to the core of my work, which is the policies, the regulations, the standards that we have for our professional roles, and knowing that I'm here to help support students and families to the best of my ability and to reach those outcomes. And there are times where, our practice needs a little improvement. And so I think being really clear about the improvement that is necessary would be important. Providing the coaching and support to change practice if that's what needs to happen. And, going through the appropriate HR processes, which might involve potentially writing a letter of warning, for example. But I think there's high expectations for a reason for all of us, and standards, and even if you were a colleague or a peer, and it's still, the expectations are still there. And so the coaching feedback would be given, or the disciplinary feedback, whatever it needs to be, because we're here to do the best we can for kids. That's the bottom
Just
line.
wanted to give you a heads up. We're about halfway through the time and halfway through the questions, so you're doing great.
Thank you.
All right. It's multiple questions, sort of all in one. How do you navigate situations in which a parent calls for changes that you believe may not align with the long-term interests of the district? How do you balance responsiveness with principled leadership? And then after making a significant decision, how do you engage with criticism for that decision while maintaining trust, transparency, and a forward momentum? Okay.
So the first is a call for changes. So I think this is a place where having previously been transparent, communicative, and have built relationships is important, because there's going to be a time where someone wants something to be done differently, there is criticism of your work or maybe even your character. And I think if you have been building those relationships over time, then those voices may there may not be as many because you're having those little conversations along the way to work through some of the difficulties. But I also think this is a place where being data informed is really important. I do think there are powerful voices and powerful opinions, especially with the way the world works today, that you can put online and people can even like them. So I think it's important to continue to anchor decisions in data. To show why the decisions are being made the way they are. I think data can help you justify why you're going to move in one way and not another. I think it also can move people to understand and to see, something that they may not have been open to seeing before about why it's important. So I think a call for change that may not be aligned would be something where I would want to have a conversation with the individual, talk about what we see as data, and continuously, share that information transparently with everybody. Your second part of the question was connected to principal leadership, I believe.
How do you balance responsiveness with principled leadership?
Yeah. So I think in terms of responsiveness with principal leadership, is that connected to the change?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I think, it's always been important to me, and I know as I was talking with our leadership team today that being able to pick up the phone when principals call you as a superintendent is very important. You really are a coach, a sounding board, and as superintendent, I think it's important that you answer the phone and provide a response in an efficient and timely manner so that you can help that principal work through whatever challenge or call for change may need to be happening. As superintendent, I also think it's important that you redirect the principal to the policy, to the regulation, to the mandate that might be applicable to their problem. And, if there's any difficulty that the principal is experiencing where, the parent or community member is just really advocating for something different and they've already made a decision, I think it's also important to offer yourself as a secondary line to engage with that family as well, to say, here are the reasons we're doing this. I do support the principal in promoting confidence in the decision that leader has made. I also think there's times where you can go to the meeting and also be just another person to engage in the conversation. It doesn't have to be a secondary conversation, but rather you become a team solving a problem. And in terms of criticism, I think there are times where you make decisions that it's not always everybody's preferred decision or outcome. And there are times where you have to, you are the leader of an entire school system. There are 6,000 students, and we have to be sure that we're making decisions in the best interest of all of them. And at times there may be families who may not agree with every decision, but I still think if there is a majority of students who are going to benefit, then hopefully we can work over and through the criticism over time. But that the decision would be made in the best interest of students as much as possible.
Great. Thank you.
So related to challenging or controversial decisions as a district, right? How would you maintain that transparent two-way communication between the district and the community?
Yeah. So I think, transparent two-way communication happens, I think about the way Dr. Sawyer has been practicing, thinking about, providing opportunities for feedback in surveys, providing opportunity for, I think about public comment is really two-way. I think about where He's had some Shrewsbury media connections where there are, he might do a series on that's televised where, you can watch it and then provide some feedback. I think I had shared earlier, I think it's important to have office hours and an opportunity where people can come and talk about what they're interested in sharing with you, talk about concerns they might have. And I think it's important to be visible. So when you're out in the community, knowing that, people may approach you at any point. I was at a TJ Maxx recently, and my husband was like, "You have to talk to that family because they're over there whispering. I think it's her." So I think it's important to be approachable and visible. Because those are the opportunities where you do build relationships and you can get some feedback that you didn't maybe even know existed. But it's important for people to feel that they can be heard and that you're approachable.
Thank you.
Can you share an example of how you built trust with a community that felt disconnected from its school leadership?
Yeah, I think when you are a new leader to a school, I think there's always an opportunity where you have to build community. There have been challenges where you have to make difficult decisions as a leader that may not make everyone in your school community happy. And I think navigating those times where people are frustrated with a decision that has been made can make it feel like there's a riff. And so you do have to genuinely work to get communication channels open again. Sometimes people will be quiet and not want to share how they're feeling. But I think it's important to always circle back to culture. To have conversations. I feel that relationships are just foundational. And so I think when you work with your union leadership, for example, and you're checking in with your SEA reps, you're checking in with your SPA reps, how does the culture feel out there? And they start to tell you things, they're very honest, and we're lucky to have such great collaboration with our union leadership. They'll tell you people are feeling burnt out. People are feeling like when this decision was made, it wasn't the one they preferred, or it made them question, your leadership or whatever that is. I think seeking the feedback, so that you do have, the story and the understanding from the perspective of staff or family really helps you to repair some of the challenges. And I think those are also conversations where people can share with you why they feel disconnected and what they feel the solution could be. Because, the perception of the leader it's the perception. It's not always exactly the reality in which people are experiencing it. So I think in order for staff or family to feel less disconnected, we have to listen to what the issue is and then repair and rebuild.
Thank you. So the next question. Sure. What is your plan to get to know the school committee? How do you plan to build and maintain a transparent, cohesive, and strong working relationship with its members?
Thanks. This was one of the first questions I asked Dr. Sawyer. I met with him several times, and I did share that I think you are an amazing board. And I'm not saying this because this is an interview. I really am just taken back by your commitment, and so I asked, how does this work? How do you make this be such a healthy, collaborative relationship? And I think it goes back to communication again. I think I would continue some of the practices that he has in place, the weekly calls with the chair, being sure that I'm transparent with information that you need to know, creating opportunities to check in with each individual on a particular cadence, workshops, retreats, collaborating and just problem solving together. I think communication is key to let you know things that may be tricky or challenging. And and to be sure that you feel informed to make the decisions you feel are best in our community. And so my goal would be to, provide you information on a regular basis that is digestible, informative, and gives you the information you need to make the decisions that are best for Shrewsbury.
Thank you.
Hey, can you describe a time when a governing body did not support your recommendation? And what steps did you take to listen and communicate your perspective and also then find common ground?
Governing board. Trying to think. I was on the COVID team, thinking a lot about how we were going to come back to school, and there was like a collective bargaining that happened with a smaller amendment that came out of that for when we came back to schools, and that was we knew this was going to happen. That was a difficult time where people, really felt unsafe coming back to school. I think there was definitely some disagreement in what that should look like, hybrid, remote, how many days was hybrid, how many days were remote, how far the desks should be apart. I mean, really, it was tumultuous. And we kept coming back and kept coming back. And at this point, it was Zoom call after Zoom call, trying to navigate relationships. And there were certainly different perspectives, and it took time. It took us a lot of time to come to an agreement about, what would make staff feel safe coming back, the union advocating for particular safety measures that they needed in order to feel like they could come back. And all along, also working with different subcommittees about the curriculum, the tools that people needed. So I think at first there was this feeling of we can't come back. This other district, comparing to other districts, this district gets this district's doing that, this one's not going back at all. So I think it's just balancing priorities, being sure that we're staying true to our core mission and our core values. And listening and leaning in so that you can come up with another idea, come up with another solution, and problem solve to find common ground. I think, the other thing that came to mind is the building committee that I'm part of currently. There was a different building committee years prior in a vote that did not pass in the town where I live. And that was a reconfiguration to add another K-4 school rather than these intermittent changes. And there was a big impact when our town said no. And all along I kept, saying in circle groups and going to meetings this K-4 school really would matter to our town. And that isn't a governing board I'm in charge of or a part of, but that was something I still sought to promote and try to change, and why I felt so adamant about why I needed to be part of this new building committee, because I understood that whatever we brought forth to the town again would need to go through, because we needed to meet the needs of our students and my children who are impacted. So I think there's just a tireless effort when you really truly believe in something to partner with governing boards or a union to really push things through that you think would benefit the town.
This is a scenario. How would you handle a situation where the school committee remains against something that you recommended? And how would you respond and move forward with the school committee members after that type of a disagreement?
Sure. I think there are various reasons why a school committee may feel one way and a superintendent another. I think what really continues to matter most is respectful dialogue. Continuing to share the impact that this project would have or would not have, and just remaining steadfast in the relationship, and considering other avenues that the school committee might find applicable or appropriate to to find alternative ways, potentially. You know, as a school principal, I haven't had the opportunity yet to work with the board as closely as a superintendent would. But what matters to me most is that this is a collaborative relationship, and one that is educative in both directions. I certainly think a superintendent has a lot of knowledge and understanding, but so do all of you. And you are, you know, the voted members of our community, and you do have a different perspective than I do. And so if there is a disagreement, I think it's one where I would respect it, and seek to understand your point of view and continue to work with you to promote what you feel is best for our students, and find a way where my initiative would align with the perspective you're looking for.
Thank you.
Please describe your leadership style and how it has evolved over time.
Yeah. My leadership style has definitely evolved over time. I think at first I came into leadership thinking that I was the person who had to solve all the problems for the people. And now I have come to understand that really what I believe deeply in is collective action to work toward a common goal. My leadership style is rooted in, you know, in instructional. Instruction is the core that drives all the decisions that we make. I believe in equity, excellence, and community. I think we, in my leadership style, I'm always thinking about, you know, whose needs are we meeting, whose needs are we not meeting yet. I'm thinking about excellence in terms of outcomes. How are we supporting our students to reach excellence? How are we supporting our educators to reach excellence in their practice? Because we are always continuing to grow, creating excellent professional learning communities and working community where teachers feel valued and seen and heard and appreciated. And the same with community, being sure that my leadership incorporates the voices of those that I serve, including families, parents, and just community members in local businesses and organizations, because I think all of those perspectives help create an environment where students thrive.
Thank you.
What aspects of the district or their superintendent responsibilities do you expect will stretch your leadership the most? And how do you plan to grow in those areas?
There are certainly places that I'm looking forward to a stretch. And I think one of those places is I think a stretch for me is going to be thinking about CTE programming. I say a stretch because I haven't been involved with it yet. I think the work that Mr. Bazidlo and Karen Aries and Dr. Lazat have already started is amazing and really impressive for our students. I think the pathways are awesome. It's a stretch because I haven't been involved with it yet, but I'm also very motivated to be part of it. I think the opportunity to have innovative programming in our school really is exciting to me. I love to think about ways that we can support our students to have, you know, college and career readiness through these pathways is amazing. I also would love to see the continued expansion at Oak. I think kids are really excited about it and ripe and ready for more of it. So I think it would be a stretch because I haven't been involved in it yet, and it comes with a financial tag that is we need to be able to fund. And so I think it's balancing innovation with, you know, the fiscal reality, but knowing that we still need to continue to move it forward. I think the other stretch is continuing, you know, to think about how we support the financial stability of the school system, and I think that's a stretch for every Massachusetts town. To be honest with you, there are just so many dynamic pieces that play into the budget: transportation, out of district costs, the changes in enrollment with an increase in students with disabilities and English language learning. Circuit breaker funding. There's a lot of volatility that comes there, and is certainly a place for me to learn. But one thing about me, and I've hoped that this has come across in the process, is that I am motivated to learn. I've always been a continuous learner. It's part of the reason why I went back to school, and am a doctoral candidate at this point. But I appreciate that through that BC program and process, I've also had an opportunity to engage in what's called the LLPS program, which is a leadership licensure program. And in that program, seated superintendents have been teaching us courses specifically about some of the challenges you will face as a superintendent. And I had the privilege of learning from Dr. Tutwiler, who previously stepped down, and is actually my dissertation reader, my mentor. He taught us strategic budgeting, and that course was really dynamic and really put us in the seat of, here's your budget, here's what you proposed, here's what was approved, here's your strategic priorities, go. And I think, we really had to put together robust plans of how we would make this work. So I know that it's a stretch for any Massachusetts superintendent. It will be one for me as well, but one I'm ready for, and I'm invested in learning more about and doing it well, because it's so very important.
Thank you.
What do you see as the district's greatest challenge and opportunity?
I think we are a great school system. I think we have a lot going really, really well. And I think what we have going well most of all is I think we have some of the best educators in the state. I think that the challenge continues to be, how do we continue to support our educators to meet the needs of all learners? We are high achieving. However, not every student is high achieving, and so thinking dynamically about how we can support our educators to reach all students, how we can create programs and systems that promote every child to really reach their full potential. And I think that can be difficult because, we're changing practice and we're changing beliefs. And I think that can be really challenging work, but I also think it's our greatest opportunity because we're seeing it starting to happen already. And especially with our K4 literacy that's expanded now all the way up to Oak, or I should say K6 because it's at Sherwood as well. But the more we do that work, there are times where we're coming into challenges where we are being more we're recognizing more students we're not meeting yet, and so we have to think creatively. But I think there's an opportunity to have further alignment in our systems and structures, further alignment in how we collect data, how we utilize data, what types of data we use, and then working together across schools a bit tighter. Because although we do spend time together and we do have leadership meetings on a regular basis, I would say that there's an opportunity for us to learn more from the successes we are seeing within our own school system, because right now it can be a challenge for us to learn from each other and together.
What do you anticipate will be your biggest area of learning as you step into the superintendent role?
I think for me, the biggest area of learning will be continuing to navigate just kind of the politics that come with being the superintendent. I think that it's really important, like I said, to build relationships, to understand the community deeply, because I do think there's a lot of politics and a lot of opinions and multiple sides of the table. So I think that will be something that will be new for me. Because I think as a principal, sometimes you can be in your bubble. And I think just really learning all of the communities, understanding all of the school communities and understanding the larger community, as well as the priorities of the select board. I appreciated meeting with Mr. Mizikar today. I've had some engagement with him previously, but those will be new relationships for me that I want to build.
So I have the last question.
Okay.
Why are you the right leader for Shrewsbury Public Schools at this time?
I care very deeply about Shrewsbury, and I believe that I have an understanding of what our community wants, what our community needs, and the challenges that face us that are coming our way and that we're in already. And I believe that I have the understanding of our organization that can help to influence change, that can promote student learning, that can promote a culture where staff, feel supported and empowered. And I know I can do this work well, and I have the credentials to do it, the experience and the knowledge, and I'm motivated to learn and be the best leader I can for this community. And I just feel really privileged to have this opportunity. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anybody have anything further? Great.
Nope, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor shall signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you and good night.